Alright guys, it's time to talk about how to make good characters in After the Flash. Now the first step is a simple one. You just need to give your character a job, backstory, and personality. Now of course I'm not telling you to write an essay about your character's whole life. Just keep it simple. They're a fisherman or a scavenger. They grew up in a scrap settlement and lived there their whole lives. Or they're nomadic, and they're a laid-back and easygoing person, or a paranoid and cautious person. That simple foundation can help you get an idea of what that person might carry on them. Like maybe because they're a fisherman, you can give them a fishing pole, or because they're a hunter, you can give them an axe or a spear. Because they're living in a settlement, they probably won't keep that much gear on them because they're not planning to stay far away from home. Or if they're nomadic, they'll probably keep everything on them. Maybe because they're a laid-back person, they don't keep that much stuff on them because they're not worried about a lot of things. And if they're a cautious and paranoid person, they'll probably keep a lot of things on them so they are prepared for anything. Once you can figure out those, you can move on to their clothing, because your character's clothing sort of acts as the base for your accessories when it comes to their color and style. And what I mean by style is in civilian, military, mercenary, raider, basically whatever profession or like type of clothing they're wearing should match what accessories you're using. If you do have a couple Robux lying around to spend on clothing, let me recommend you a few clothing groups if you aren't aware of them already. And they are Anarchy's Apocalyptic Apparel and Snowveil. Both these clothing groups have clothing that fit ATF's apocalyptic theme really well, and they have no shortage of clothing for just 5 Robux a piece. So once you pick out some clothing that you think best matches your character, there are 4 main sections of the body that you should focus your accessories on, and they're the places that people usually see first and you have a lot of room to work with. These 4 main points are waist, chest, head, and back. Once you're happy with the accessories that you have on these main parts of your body, you can focus on things like arms, shoulders, and legs. Now when it comes to custom making your own accessories, for the most part, I do not recommend building your own accessories out of like basic building blocks. Unless you just cannot find the accessory and you have to make it yourself, you should try to avoid building your own accessories, as you're only allowed to put 50 accessories on your body. So you want to make sure every single one counts, and putting 10 or so of them into one object, such as like a gun or like a backpack, is not worth it in my opinion. But if you still want or need to build your own accessories, I'll put up some basic building block accessories you can use, as well as some basic textures. Make sure to pause the video, copy them down if you want to use them. But with that out of the way, let's go on to actually building some accessories. First thing I highly recommend is you getting the Retextures Discord, because that's where you find all the good retextures for your accessories. Now the only method I really know how to get the Retextures Discord is by going to After the Flash Mirage Roblox page, scrolling down on the About tab where you will find the Flash Storm Discord. Once there, verify and do whatever else you need to do to be able to type. Go to ATF questions and ask somebody to give the link to the Retextures Discord. That's the only way I know how to do it, because it's not in the invite hub. If you do know a better way, feel free to leave it in the comments to help others out. So now that you have your background, clothing, and many accessories at your disposal, one last thing you need to remember is to keep in theme, especially when it comes to the color scheme. Your clothing basically acts as the base for your color scheme. So if you have brown clothing, you should have accessories that fit the color scheme, such as brown or darker colors. Now of course, it's okay to have some color because it helps add contrast. But for things like backpacks and other items that basically act as your framework, you should keep them the same color as your clothing. Alrighty, now with all those tips and tricks out of the way to basically help you get inspired to creating character, let me just go through basically like all of my characters and explain the thought process and whatnot behind them, to give you some ideas on how to make characters, because I don't want to make this video about you just copy and pasting what I do. I want you to take away how to make your own characters, because I have my own specific style, and it's definitely going to be different from other people's styles. So let's just get into it here. Now what I just want to say here is that for most of my characters, what I like to do is I like to put stuff on them that basically explains what kind of person they are. Without telling somebody in the bio or anything, I just want a person to look at my character, kind of get an understanding of it, at the very least, what profession they're in. For example, I got this detective guy here, and just already looking at him, you can already tell what profession he's in pretty easily. And I have my engineer over here. You can also tell, you know, he's got a toolbox, he's got a hammer, he's got a wrench, he's actually got a fusion battery and a welding mask on. It's pretty obvious what he probably does for a living, you know. Being able to tell others what kind of character and what's happened to this person without actually, you know, writing it in your bio, I think is very important. You know, as you can see here, his arm is pretty messed up and he's got an eye missing. So it's safe to assume that he's gone through stuff, or maybe even he's had failed experiments with whatever field of engineering he's in. You don't know, maybe a gun that he made blew up and now his arm is injured and his eye is poked out. You know, of course, if you're struggling to do the whole background that I said in the beginning, that's totally fine. What you should also try to focus on is what would a character need to survive in the wasteland, like the basics. And basically all of my characters have that same layer throughout. If you notice, all of them do have a knife, some sort of knife and some sort of medical bag on them. And usually a couple of them have their own canteens and whatnot to help them be able to survive. You know, everything on your bag should have a purpose, whether it is to express something about your character or is actually useful in some sort of situation, like a grappling hook, a shovel, a lantern, or a flashlight. You know, this doesn't have to be too complicated. This isn't like an art form or anything where, you know, you're trying to send a deeper message to somebody. It's just putting stuff on a person so they look nice and it makes sense for the apocalypse. Of course, I can understand maybe you're just starting off, you don't have a background. It's possible to even work backwards from the beginning, you know. For this character, he's a little kid that like sells moonshine, right? That's what the little jug's on the back for. And actually, I didn't start that character with that thought process in mind. I actually saw the barrel on the Retextures Discord and I'm like, that's something cool. Maybe I can use it for something. So, you know, it's okay to work backwards on some of these things. So when it comes to my characters, I like to make them busy looking, you know? No matter where you look, there's always a lot of stuff going on somewhere. And I always like to give my characters a lot of pouches. A lot of pouches mean you can put a lot of things on your character. As you can see, you got a Holy Bible, you got a little, just a little gizmo, a little doodad right there. Of course, I got a first aid kit, because I think it's always important. I have a second one as well. You know, it's more heavy duty. It's like the Voyager's medical kit. Again, a gas mask that's very important in the wasteland, especially because of the rad storms. In fact, I think there's a rad storm going on right now in the game, so, you know, goggles, you know, just in case blizzards and whatnot, you don't want to get stuff in your eyes. So basically, you just need to put something on there and explain why it should be there, you know. Canteen, because you need water in the wasteland. A guide how to survive on the wasteland. You know, maybe this person isn't that experienced of a wasteland, or maybe they've lived in a scrap town their whole lives and they're just leaving, you know. That's why he's got such a big pack on him, you know, he's just traveling. Now, of course, you don't need a really big bag to have a lot of detail, right? And like in this case, you don't need a lot of things to make your character look busy and interesting, you know. Quite a small bag, you know, a little satchel, but there's still a lot of stuff going on, you know. Medical stuff, a crowbar, Holy Bible just, you know, tucked in the strap right there, and a nice mug right there, and a lantern. You don't have to have that many things to make it look like your character is pretty busy, you know. Now let me start talking about heads. Me personally, I have a style. If you've noticed already yet, all my characters have some sort of hat or helmet on. I think hats and stuff, you can do a lot more with hats than just like regular hair and nothing else. Another thing you may notice is that everybody has this hair. This is my favorite hair by far. It feels weird not using this hair for me. Mainly because it's just, this hair works really well with hats. Because it's a 2D hair, it's flat. It's in fact the hair that Chad uses as well. And for good reason. It's just a very nice, clean hair that works on just about any hat, because again, you don't have to worry about it clipping through your hat or anything like that. And you don't have to worry about making your hat too big to make sure it doesn't clip, like, you know, the more frilly hairs. This is not a hair you should use by itself. I think it's specifically designed for hats, because this hair just kind of looks weird on its own. Let me just remove like the hats and whatnot. Goggles, hat. There. I think it's definitely quite a weird hair on its own. It's because again, it's just so flat. It's not meant to be on its own, if you ask me. That's why I think it's a really good hat hair, because it just adds detail without, you know, causing issues. You may have also noticed this when I removed the hat, but there's another trick here to customization. If something isn't the right color that you want, you can always duplicate it and basically make a shader of it. So you duplicate it, you set its texture to 0, and then you change its color, you see, and you like set it to like point. You can mess around with the transparency a little bit. I like to keep it from the 0.5 to like the 0.9 range, so it's, you know, just barely there. And you can just slide it over your hat, and look at that, it just changes the shade of your hat. Of course, once you move it, it will never fit on properly again, but if I just reload it here, you know, you duplicate it once you like where it's at, and then you change the color, and there we go. Now look at that, it actually looks the same color as the sleeve. That's also what I've been saying before, that you need to keep in line with your clothing color. Again, it's very important. If you have like, you know, if you have brown or something and you start using like black, like a black backpack or black pouches or belt, it's gonna look kind of out of character and not really match everything. Now I've noticed from looking through the Retextured Discord that brown, the most prolific type of like accessory texture that they have. Now of course, it doesn't have to be the same color per se. It can, like, you know, complement each other. Like this sort of like light brown to like light yellow in certain areas matches quite well with the, you know, the olive green here. Again, when it comes to making characters, I always like put as many pouches as you can, and then fill them with how much stuff you think your character would carry on. Like some characters might not put a lot of stuff in the pouches and whatnot. Somebody might carry a lot of stuff. And you know, there doesn't even have to be pouches. Like this hat is just kind of like clipped on and hanging. It doesn't need a pouch to, like, you know, be in. You can just hang off the backpack loosely. Be just like clipped to the side, you want to say. You know, it doesn't need an exact pouch to be perfectly fit in. Keeping in theme with the color is very good. Here, I got this throwaway, which I've like never touched once, but it's okay. You don't have to necessarily be the same shade of color for some parts, you know, whatever just like looks good. So see, this definitely doesn't all match together, but that can definitely be okay, because you can see this is like, I don't really know, some sort of hunter, if you will. So, you know, he's probably not going to get all matching stuff. He's probably going to cobble stuff together. And then, of course, I got my my alumni character here with his metal detector. I'm not the best at this kind of stuff, so that's why I kind of steer clear of it, to be honest. Sometimes it's necessary to make it. Also, you find a tricky balance between, you know, making something look good and saving on props, because again, this is quite prop intensive. This is almost 20 props. That gives me 30 props left for everything else. So the props start adding up pretty quickly. But yeah, I think that's just about all the advice I can really give for this. I will be making other sort of tutorials like this. I think I've been wanting to make one about how to get into factions and whatnot, because I know I've helped out a couple other new players. It's really kind of confusing for the newer players, so I'll be doing one on that. And I've got a silly video planned in the works, so I hope somebody found this useful, and I hope it helped somebody, and I'll see y'all around.